Welcome, everybody. I'm Santiago Neeland, and this is The Divine Within, the invisible connection with God. Today, we're continuing our journey through this process of revelations, of dispensations, of this information and epochs about the relationship of humans with God, with the divine, and in the progressive evolution, how this impacted as individuals, as a human race, as a civilization. So today, I'm honored once more to have Derek with me. So in this episode, we'll continue the story of humanity's early spiritual history. After the collapse of Dalmatia, which we talked about in our last podcast, a new effort was launched to uplift civilization. In this process, we have natural evolution, but here in the arrival of Adam and Eve, nearly 38,000 years ago, their mission was to strengthen humanity biologically, establish a new cultural center, and guide the next phase of human development. But in a world still on recovering from rebellion, even this divine plan would face enormous challenges. So welcome, Derek. It's a pleasure once more to have you with us.
Thanks. Pleasure as always. Excited about this one. Adam and Eve are kind of my favorites. So,
yeah. A lot of things to unpack there, and if we put them in the place where they are in the chronologic history of the universe, not only the planet, we can understand better, and we can, a lot of things make sense. So I'm excited about that. So let's dive in. First, we're going to be talking about the mission of Adam and Eve. So Adam and Eve were sent to Earth as a part of a long-standing cosmic plan designed to help evolutionary worlds progress. The role was not to create humanity, but to uplift it, introducing new genetics, stronger physical traits, and a cultural model capable of spreading civilization across the planet. Their arrival marked the beginning of the second epochal revelation in humanity's spiritual development. So tell us about this, Derek.
All right, here we go.
Yes.
So as you said, and I think one of the first places to jump into this is that Adam and Eve were not the first people. And I think we demonstrated that quite clearly in our last episode when we were talking about the arrival of the first planetary administration. There is already all kinds of humans all over the place. And the first revelation was to establish a divine government and administration on the planet and start co-creating civilization with us in an evolutionary manner rather than a revolutionary manner. And that's what our last podcast was about. So this is a process that takes a long time. And even on a normal world that doesn't have a rebellion, this takes several 100,000 years usually. And during this time, as the culture and everything is progressing, ever so slowly, along with the ability for us to comprehend and go along with the leadings, we are evolving still biologically. And there's a certain point that we reach, which is called a biologic apex, at which point...
and let me just point out for everybody. So we're talking about that we're integrating, the really the spark of life that started in the planet and how that evolves
evolution.
Throughout this evolution, exactly. These millions, billions of years.
That's right.
To the point where we have this framework for a human that is capable of receiving spiritual capabilities, right? That's kind of where we're kind of there, right?
Exactly. So we through all that evolution, billions of years, 4 billion years of evolution from the explosion of life. Well, I think it's a little less than 4 billion, but we became human about 1 million years ago. And this apex happened to us about 40,000 years ago. So we're talking, there's still evolution takes a long time. And
yes,
when we reach this apex, and this apex is determined by celestial personalities who are guiding and watching the evolution of humanity, not just on our planet, but on every planet. This is what happens. It triggers the next bestowal of divine guidance. And this, as you know, the topic of our conversation is a divinely created couple who come to the planet, and they are known. The order of beings is called a material son and daughter, but they are known on all of the evolutionary planets as Adam and Eve when they arrive. And that's who came here as the physical manifestations of divinity of this second bestowal, revelation, on our planet. They arrived here approximately 38,000 years ago. I have the exact number. I'll tell you a bit later.
All right.
As we said, they're real people, but there is a lot of confusion and distorted memory concerning them and their mission, right?
All right. Yes.
So, as we said, not the first people. Absolutely not the first
not
people.
the beginning of creation.
No, no. The planet, as we talked about before, the planet was full of people, the Nephilim and the indigenous people who were here before the Nephilim and continue and still continue. We had talked about the Nephilim, or in the Urantia book, they call them Nodites because their leader was Nod, who lived in the land of Nod. And we'll be talking about that again. They had split into 4 different groups.
Yeah.
So the northern group was up around eastern Turkey, Lake Van, all along there under the Caspian Sea into the Kopet-Dag Mountains, that area. That was all the northern, or Nephilim, or Vanites, they call them, because their leader was Van, Lake Van. Then you have the eastern Elamite Nephilim, which is the land of Nod, and that corresponds to the area of southwest Iran now. You have the central Nodites, or Nephilim, which are the ancestors of the Sumerians, who live right there in Mesopotamia between the 2 rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. And then you have the western Nephilim, or Nodites, and they are also referred to as the Syrian ones because, Syria is in that general area.
Kind of just exploded.
So they
each
really
one
sort
that
of spread out.
Yeah, spread
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
All right.
So that's sort of the picture of where everybody was when Adam and Eve arrived, right?
Yeah.
And so their mission, they have sort of 2 main missions, right? So the first part of their mission is to, if you think of a rocket, right? And the rocket has stages so that it can escape the atmosphere. So it takes off and it goes, and that's the first stage, right?
Yeah.
But it needs more than that. So a second stage rocket lights up and kicks in and it goes even more, right?
Yeah.
And that's what this is. Okay, so they're kickstarting it, right? So they're building on the efforts of the first of the planetary administration, which is still there.
Building on that layer, let's say, where this
That's
is
right.
how everything is layered.
Yeah, I think last time I said they're blowing up the balloon bigger and bigger and bigger, right?
Exactly.
So some of the things that they're trying to do in terms of building on what the princes or the planetary administration is supposed to have already accomplished would be transitioning from hunter and herder societies to agriculture and horticulture.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're offering an even more expanded revelation of God and the local cosmos around us. They're taking our political structures to a higher level. Usually, Adam and Eve will come and replace monarchical government with representative government. So things were a little bit retrogressed, and they didn't have any of that to replace with.
Yeah, if we would have had the normal evolution, would have been really, something. You have something to work off of, but really, this was a little bit of a chaos, right?
It was total chaos. Yeah.
Total.
Yeah.
All
So,
right.
and the other part of their mission is biologic, because we're talking about kickstarting biologic evolution as well, because it's reached this apex, right?
I love
And
this part because it
yeah,
really, brings this cosmic perspective of how we need, I mean, and it really makes sense, and what I do and I study, about the patterns and how we weave, because everything is woven, you're co-creating, but how in this stage you're weaving in cosmic information and cosmic and genetics in there, so we can have a perspective, we can be able to communicate spiritually, and this is very
yeah,
interesting. So
yeah,
I love this part.
yeah, me
Tell
too.
us more, please,
Yeah,
Derek.
yeah. Um, so we have to remember that these are two divine beings
Hmm.
come to our planet for this purpose. And this second purpose, and just as important purpose, is to, and this is the exact wording, biologically uplift humanity by skillfully and strategically injecting their divine genetics into the
Hmm.
human gene pool.
Hmm.
Right.
Hmm.
So that's
Love
what
it.
they're doing. They're uplifting humanity by introducing divine genetics into the human gene pool. And the way that they do this is they create a garden of Eden where they
Uh-huh.
live. And within this garden, they set up a secondary culture, center of culture on the planet, and they
Mhm.
build up reserves of their progeny, their sons and daughters and granddaughters and granddaughters, and all through that until they've built up massive amounts of population of these divine children and beings, and then they send them forth to skillfully and strategically blend with the indigenous races of the planet, and
And this
that's how
sounds,
it gets uplifted.
this is very interesting. I mean, from,
Yeah,
and you can look at it different ways. And the way that I like to look at this is, yeah, you're every time, and how I see genetics, how the more you blend, and this is like car- part of like saying, the becoming one, the more we blend, you see a lot of the genetic pool, physically and in many ways. The more that you blend, the more possibilities you have to know to bring up the good, traits, the good qualities of the good gene pool, let's say, upwards, and you can see, especially when you see, the offspring of mixed races. I mean, the children are usually very, very beautiful. I mean, it's a very interesting, what happens. And imagine, in this cosmic perspective, if you have this material evolution, throughout all this, it becomes, we're starting from the amoeba, basically. You're
yeah,
staying from there.
yeah,
That's where we start. And where do we start from over here? And it meets right here at this point. So this is really interesting, and
yeah,
I like to see at it from this perspective. So
yeah.
please tell us more, Derek.
And on top of what you've just said, basically their goal over several thousands and thousands of years
Mm-hmm.
is to work towards the blending of all of the peoples and cultures and languages on the planet into a single universal planetary culture with a single language and a single people. And that's not sure exactly what happens after that. I have a lot of ideas,
Yeah, yeah.
but that's in my mind, that would be the point where we would start maybe having the opportunity to meet other planetary cultures and things like that.
Exactly. Now,
Perhaps. Yeah.
imagine that. I mean, I don't know. I mean, because a lot of it we have to think of it. It's theory to us because, since we do not fall into a normal, evolutionary path, we have to just assume things. But imagine if everything would have gone, with plan, no rebellion, a good, Adam and Eve's mission would have happened up to now our point, with our technology, with our capability, with our evolution, I mean, where would we be with communications outwards, in our lifetime. So I'm, a little bit disappointed that we right now at our point we don't have an extended family and dimension of play like would be maybe Star Wars, but we do have a lot of a lot to work locally. So I think, I mean, that's a trade off. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot to do locally that will help to get to that eventually. So, anyways, uh,
I think
please.
I think just to go on a small tangent, and please rein me in because I'll probably keep going. But
Okay, okay, no worries, no worries.
I think a lot of the idea of having different races on a planet is for us to learn how to work with um, groups and individuals who are different than us. So a lot of what our training as we progress through the universe after we die and go into the afterlife, which is not an afterlife, it's just a life. But um, a lot of that training is based on socialization, learning to work with more and more diverse
Yeah,
groups of people and stuff like that. So it's
yeah,
socialization, right?
yeah.
So that's one of the reasons why I think there's different races and different groups of people on the planet. Now, when Adam and Eve come along and they achieve their eventual goal after, I think, a usual dispensation of Adam and Eve lasts mm, um, ballpark 50,000 years. Um, by that point, if we have one planetary culture, um, and we've all sort of been blended into a planetary race, we lose the opportunity to learn that socialization, right? And
Exactly.
so, and that's why I said, and that's why I speculate that at that point, we would have to venture outwards from our planet to be able to have different peoples and different cultures to learn to socialize with.
Yeah, and
So,
let me just imagine. I mean, to put into perspective, because maybe people right now are looking and saying, "Oh, come on, this is just sci-fi." But if you're saying that, but way back when in Dalmatia, they were all already thinking and presenting steam,
yeah,
where would we be right now? Where steam was introduced, what, 100 and 200 and what was it? I don't know, but
the end of the 1800s is when we started working with it. Yeah.
imagine
So,
that. So
yeah,
imagine where we would be technology wise, right?
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Like,
Pretty interesting. So,
yeah.
I mean, and real quick before, because I mean, I love that, and with you, we could probably stay on topic a lot. But before we go into the next segment, which is
Yeah.
we're going to be talking about this situation or this experiment and this and I mean, we understood what the Adam and Eve's mission are universally, but now we're going to look at it what happened locally. So
Yes.
before that, what other things should we consider? What other things are we missing from what their mission and what these this phase in evolution is all about?
The other third thing that they had to do, which was specific to our planet,
Okay.
um, was that they had to somehow try to rescue our planet from the absolute
Okay.
total devastation and upheaval of the rebellion. So they were supposed to come here and they were supposed to, like I already said, they were supposed to take, um, they were supposed to do that second stage boost from what the planetary administration was supposed to have already built for them, right?
Yeah.
But when our Adam and Eve came here, there was nothing. There was nothing.
This
It
is a
was it
good
was
point.
all, yeah. So, and that's something that I think we have to really, really remember and take into account when we start talking about what actually happened.
Definitely.
So,
This is something, let's say that if they were already tasked with a couple of things, they had another function that really wasn't in their maybe even skill sets. I don't know. And
Right.
so it's really to put into perspective where, in context, especially where they would start when we unravel what happened in
Yeah.
the next episode. So
Okay.
stay tuned and let's dive in next segment. Welcome back. We're continuing with the story of Adam and Eve, the situation, the step in human evolution, universal evolution. So let's see what happened really locally with these material sons and daughters that Derek is talking to us about. So let's dive into this segment, which is the Garden of Eden. So, to carry out their mission, Adam and Eve established the legendary Garden of Eden, a center of learning, culture, and spiritual teaching. Designed as a model civilization, the garden introduced agriculture, education, and new forms of social organization intended to gradually uplift the surrounding tribes. For a time, Eden stood as one of the most advanced societies the ancient world had ever seen. So tell us a little bit more of our
All
beloved Garden of
right.
Eden.
Yes, here it is. History.
Yes.
So, picking up where we left off, I guess, with the history is we have, the spread out of the different groups of the Nephilim, and we have especially Van and his people. Van, if everybody remembers, is the leader of the loyal staff, the loyal Anunnaki, who remained loyal and tried to
Hmm.
keep the light of civilization burning for 160,000 years from the outbreak of the rebellion to the point that we're about to start talking about now, which is about 40,000 years ago.
Okay.
So at this point where this apex is realized, the biologic apex and stuff, Van is, upholding civilization as best as he can in his region in Anatolia around Lake Van, where I described. And they made him aware that Adam and Eve were going to be coming. So he knew that Adam and Eve always lived
But
in a garden.
let's
Yes,
can you
sorry.
clarify about Van and I mean a lot of people that are just coming in and tuning in. How can
Yeah.
this person
So
how
Van
old is he?
Van was a member of the physical and visible staff
Hmm.
of the first divine administration, right?
Yeah.
So he was actually we talked about this with the tree of life. By means of
Exactly.
eating the fruit of the tree of life, he was able to maintain immortality, which is
Hmm.
necessary for the type of work that has to be done with these dispensational bestowals, right?
Hence the
And
stories of the gods and the times of the gods that we talked about in our last
that's
podcast.
right.
If you don't know about it, please look it up. Just look for Derek, and he's
The
gonna.
other podcast, yeah,
You
because
can you can
that's
go
super
and because
important.
it's really puts it into perspective, and
Yeah,
really you have to see it and understand where we are in this progression. So
yeah,
please go ahead.
yeah. So this is a part two.
Yes,
so
exactly.
so Van, knowing that Adam and Eve always live in a garden,
Mm-hmm.
um, sent some volunteers out to start looking for suitable locations, and they found like 4 or 5 different locations. But for our purposes, we'll talk about 2 of them. Okay, so the runner-up
Mm-hmm.
location was actually in Mesopotamia again, in a area between the 2 rivers again, where the rivers came actually close enough that they could build a defensive wall, which is
Mm-hmm.
important because there's a lot of, well, belligerent Nephilim around,
Yeah.
and other indigenous tribes as well. Um, so that was the runner-up. But what they actually decided on was what is described as a long, narrow peninsula extending
Okay.
from extending westwards from the then eastern shores of the Mediterranean Ocean, or Mediterranean Sea,
Okay.
sorry. Okay,
Okay. Because we
so it's a long.
it wasn't so extensive, the ocean, right? It
That's
wasn't so
something
big.
that I think a
The
lot of people forget when they're trying to look for this place, is that that it wasn't actually the Mediterranean Sea at the time. It hadn't
Exactly.
been, the Sicilian land bridge hadn't broken yet. So it was just pockmarked inland huge lakes, like the Great Lakes type thing, in
Yeah. Yeah.
Canada. Um, anyway, so this is how it's described. It's a long, narrow peninsula extending westwards from the then eastern shores of the Mediterranean. And so
Mm.
they unanimously decided this is awesome because the peninsula is really defensible.
Exactly.
And so what they did was they uprooted from the area in Anatolia, and they all moved down into the peninsula, and they started building in
Okay.
preparation for Adam and Eve coming. So
Okay.
the first thing that they did, and I think it's really because I'm going to be describing the garden now. So what I'd like to encourage everybody to do is just sort of sit back, close your eyes, and try and imagine this, because it's pretty epic. So the first thing they did was, where the peninsula joins the mainland, is they started building a wall. And this wall was 27 miles long when it was
Okay.
finished. Okay. 27 miles long along the whole breadth of the peninsula where it meets the mainland. And
Uh-huh.
along that, there were 12 huge, massive gates where you could enter
Okay.
the garden from. And in front of that wall, they built a smaller wall. So, just picture this, right? It's just incredible when you think about it. Like, imagine yourself just standing in front of it and just looking at this, right? Um, and so
Imagine how many, I mean, just the massiveness, right?
it's incredible, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and we're not even, they haven't even
In it.
started building the stuff in the garden yet, which
Yeah, we're
we're
not
getting
in it
to.
yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in between this smaller wall in the front and the larger defensive wall,
Mm-hmm.
um, they filled it with wild animals. So like, there's no getting in there, right? Um, like, and the reason that they did that is because, society had completely collapsed, and they had to defend the peninsula, because their primary occupation in the garden was to
It
increase
wasn't
their
because they
population.
didn't want to they didn't want to mingle. It was because it was a
Not
real
yet.
reason. Yeah, it
Not
was a
yet.
real reason behind all
Yes.
that. Yeah.
Yes, right? So that's the first thing they did, this incredible wall, and I picture that in my mind a lot, and it's just, it takes my breath away every time I think about it, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So so they've got this and all the wild animals in between those two gates and everything. And then they start building inside the garden, okay? So I hope you're still imagining this.
Yeah.
So in the center of the peninsula, they built this exquisite stone temple of the unseen Father, the universal Father. Okay. And that was the center. And in the center of that temple, they replanted the tree of life, because Adam and
Okay.
Eve were going to need that too, because they needed to stay
For the
long
long
too,
haul.
so that they could guide civilization and also guide the blending of the divine genetics, right?
Yeah.
Um, so in the center, we have this temple. Now, to the
Mm-hmm.
north of the temple, we have the administrative buildings. Like, you don't think
Okay.
about this when you're reading the biblical record of Eden, do you?
You
Right?
just, and that's it. I mean, and
Yeah.
this is something. Let me just point it out, Derek, because in our last podcast, I think it's important to point out a little bit of the immensity of God, and
Yes.
it's really important to move beyond what we know in what we've taught what we have not taught, but we had available. Let's put it
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
And the accounts that we had available to this, 2.0, it's going from from whoever is old as Derek and I are. I am you can remember, starting computers with MS-DOS, which is really, only people that were really into that really liked it, but I didn't. Nowadays, it's a whole different thing. So
Yeah. Yeah.
imagine that evolution, and when you really understand it, it really serves you in that perspective, and the understanding of God, it takes God into another dimension. So
Yeah.
please continue, Derek.
Yeah. God is so much more massive than we can even begin to imagine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the the details and intricacies of the universal administration, that's what really
Yeah.
blows my mind, you know,
Yeah.
what's really
Yeah.
happening, and that we have even the audacity sometimes to think that, oh, we thought about the separation of powers as, just as something that just humans. No, no, no. We're bringing so much cosmic information, from the structures of the universe into our existence,
Yeah.
and that's the part of your will be done on heaven as on earth. And that is, and what in all the cultures presents as so is above, so is below. So this
That's
is
right.
this is really the exact point of the reflective influence that we have on our minds, on our spirit, on our matter, and everything from the order of the universe, the patterns
Yes.
in the order of the universe, and the unfoldment of the universe. And we don't even notice. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the point. I think if the more you notice and the more you can be conscious about it and contribute to it, which in the end is service. It's really simple,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It becomes really interesting. So please tell us
Well
more
said.
about.
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you.
So we're trying to picture the garden. So we've got the temple in the middle, and
Uh
to the
huh.
north we have the administrative buildings.
Uh huh.
Um, to the south were um, homes and domiciles for the workers and their family, because there was a lot of workers involved in this, several thousand, building this over a period of 80 years. It took them to build what they did before Adam and Eve arrived.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to have homes. So that's where
Mm-hmm.
they were, to the south. And to the west was an area allotted for schools, because
Mm-hmm.
they were going to be bringing up a lot of children and training them and teaching them this new not advanced, but higher civilization, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And in the east were the homes built for Adam and Eve and their offspring.
Okay.
So that's the general layout of the garden. And a lot of the garden was also given over to just naturalness. Like, it was very botanical
It
and
was a
beautiful.
garden,
And
basically.
yeah, it was a garden.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So very, very botanical in that way. So, um, in terms of scope and scale, the architectural plans for the garden provided homes and abundant land for a population of 1 million people.
Okay.
So that should give you some scale. And I also want to say, when you're thinking about that, they aren't living in apartment buildings. They're talking abundant land and homes for 1 million people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So that give you some idea of the size of this.
Which I think is very important, and I think it's pointed out is in some parts. You're more of it's your field of expertise, but in the Urantia book, it tells us, about the importance of not being all crammed up in just one space, and to have
Yeah.
this spacing in for the quieting and everything, right?
I know the part that you're thinking of, and
Yeah,
what they are talking about is for younger people, the movers and the shakers when you're young,
yeah,
living in multi-dwelling housing, like apartments and that kind of stuff, is fine. But once you're in a family and you're older and stuff like that, um, that kind of stuff is frowned upon.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
you
Well,
gotta have abundant land and space for your family, right?
definitely,
So yeah,
definitely.
so I
Awesome,
know exactly
awesome.
what you're talking about there.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right, all right.
So
So tell us more.
yeah, so as I said, it took 80 years from when they started building to when Adam and Eve arrived. By time Adam and Eve arrived, by time they arrived, um, even after 80 years, the garden was only a quarter finished, based on the architectural plan.
Okay.
But in that 80 years, they had constructed thousands of miles of irrigation ditches, more than 12,000 miles of paved paths and roads. Like, just
Okay.
just get that in there. Get that in there. 12,000 miles of paved paths and roads. And that's only a quarter done.
Yeah.
and just over 5,000 brick buildings. So um, when they're building most of the houses and stuff like that, they're still using brick. So like we're talking mud brick probably still
Yeah.
at that point.
Okay.
Yeah. And the way that the houses were grouped is they were in clusters of no more than 7 buildings in one cluster and stuff like that. So that's
Okay.
something that will help you picture what it sort of looked like a bit more.
Okay.
So Adam and Eve, after 80 years of this, arrived.
Okay.
And I've got the exact year here from the year 2026, which is what it is now. They
Mm-hmm.
arrived 37,940 years ago.
Okay.
So that's when they arrived. And they arrived on this peninsula in the Garden of Eden to
Okay.
start their mission and try and to rescue us from the rebellion and the whole mess that all was, and to try and pick things up and move on and to try and get this biological kickstart going. So
Uh,
huge
uh,
mission.
uh, a
Huge
huge
mission.
mission, a
Yeah.
huge mission. So let's,
Yeah.
like we
Yeah.
said, this is important to put things into perspective that it wasn't an easy task, and that for what happened later, which is very interesting, and we're almost getting to that.
We'll get there.
So,
Yeah, we're
I
getting
mean,
there.
this is just
Yeah.
pre Adam and Eve. So, what happened when they got here? Can we just
Yeah.
like do a
So
sprint to that?
basically, just talking a little bit about life in the garden because it gives you some insight into kind of what civilization could have been
Yeah,
or where it would have been heading, because they're trying to build this up, and it's the divine ideal, I guess, is the
yeah,
best way to describe that, right? So in the East, where Adam and Eve and their children lived, until they were 16 years old, the kids went to school there in the East, right?
mm-hmm.
And the structure was that the older kids would teach the younger kids.
Okay,
And I love that because I've spent a lot of years in Japan,
yeah.
and the word for teacher in Japanese is sensei. And if you look at the characters that make that word up, it translates as one who is just a little bit ahead. And
Definitely.
and I love that because that's all it is. That's what a teacher is. There's someone who is still on the path, hopefully, still learning, but they're a little bit ahead and they can help the people behind them along. And I
I
love that.
like that, and and
Yeah.
and one of the things is that with my children, I they went to Montessori schools, and one of the things in the way that is structured, let's say in elementary, it's really two grades. It's not first, second, third. It's two grades,
Yeah.
and you have the first half and then the second half. And the idea is because right there, like that, you have the younger kids that are learning, and you have the teacher, the guide, and they learn in their own, and it's very individualized. Each one has, somebody is faster with math, somebody's faster with, so it's really you evolve as you need. But it's very important that you have these older kids, that they get it in a way that, and they can explain it to the younger kids in a way that maybe the teacher and the way they're approaching it couldn't do. So it's really important that that you have this, and it also helps you socialize, and it breaks the
Yes.
barriers. That's something that's
Yeah.
very interesting, with kids. A lot of the Montessori kids, you see how they relate within, the different ages and with the adults, and it's very different than other kids. Something that
Yeah.
when I wasn't a parent, I didn't even realize.
Yeah.
But as you go into that, and that's let me just point this out as a method. I always say it's not that the kids have to learn that way; it's that the parents have to learn that way, because you have to let them really grow in their own. So, please,
Parents are learning how to be parents while the kids are
that
learning how
oh,
to be.
oh that's
You know,
I don't know
don't
which
tell
one
the
is.
kids that.
Yeah, I don't know which one is a more yeah, challenging. Well, we know which one's more challenging
Yeah.
anyways, but
Yeah. Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah.
Let's continue
So
with your story.
So once they hit 16, they go, because I said in the western part of the peninsula it was schools, right? So once they
Mhm,
hit 16, they go to these schools in the western part, right?
mhm.
And interesting that you said this just now, but the overarching purpose of the education in the western schools is socialization.
That's the foundation.
Yeah.
Your
And that's
compatriot Peterson is whom I really admire. Just that's his foundation. You know how you have
yeah,
to really be able to navigate through your society
yeah.
in and beyond. Yeah,
And that's we were talking before. That's the whole purpose of learning to, like, our whole education throughout our whole universe career is learning how to socialize with different groups and different individuals and work with them, and it's all socialization. So that
yeah.
just, yeah, amazing. So their schedule basically in the mornings, they would take classes and they'd do subjects and they'd actually learn and stuff. But in the afternoons, they would, all of the afternoons were devoted to competitive play.
Okay.
So contrast that to schools now. And when you think
I'm
you
gonna write
think play,
down.
well, you think play, they're just fooling around, right? But they're not. They're
No,
socializing.
no,
They're learning
no.
how to, especially with team sports, right? They're learning how to work in a
And
group.
actually, good that I brought Peterson up. But in his book, I think that's one of the main things that he talks about play. How play is how we
Yeah,
define meaning, how we understand and give meaning to things. So it's really important,
right.
you know. Imagine now. Well, I mean, that's the whole look at society. I mean, nobody knows what the heck is going on because they haven't been able to socialize. Because if you do not agree, and maybe somebody beats you or whatnot, I mean, look at it. And this is something, and I think I don't know if it was with you that I pointed this out. Something that not that I dislike, but I saw as a end of an age when about my summer camp in Texas is that, you know, there was a whole thing called the Uncle Bill's team that it was very aspirational, and you had to really acquire that, and you had to really look for it, and that really, you know, I wasn't able. I think I talked about this in another podcast, and I wasn't able to achieve that because of my ego, and that really broke me, and that experience of my life really is what molded me into what I am now. You know, it was crucial in my life. But
Yeah,
now it's not as an achievement thing. It's something that, you know, everybody's given to, and they are robbing a lot of the that experience. You know, I think it's very important that we do not rob people of that socializing, that achieving, and that, you know, because it builds character. It
yeah,
tempers your, you know, it destroys a little bit of your darker side or your ego, and it builds your character. It tempers your character. So it's very important, you know, the how, and this is important of the importance of the garden. You know, the model of socialization
yes,
beyond just the genetic. You know,
yes.
and then we're gonna go a little bit in a minute to the next part, which is what happened in the
What
downfall.
happened?
But
Yeah.
anything else that you want to point out? I mean, now that we're
Yeah, yeah,
talking
there's
about
still a little bit more,
coming in,
but yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
You want to talk about it here, or you want to go further on?
No, this is all part of this part. So we're still talking about the life in the garden a
All
little
right,
bit. So
go ahead.
so in the mornings they were doing studies, in the afternoons we had competitive play, and in the
Okay.
evenings they say it was devoted to more socialization and the cultivation of personal friendships and stuff like that. So it's just full on socialization, learning how to work with others, learning how to work with in groups, and that's everything. That's our whole, again, it's our whole universe career. So why don't we start
Yeah.
now?
Yeah.
So in terms of like what they were actually taught as subjects, I can list those off really quick.
Yeah.
They were taught, this is very similar to what was being taught in Dalmatia
Uh-huh.
160,000 years before,
Uh-huh.
but it collapsed. So they were taught health and the care of the body, the
Mm-hmm.
golden rule, at least a form of the golden rule, you know, do
Mm-hmm.
unto others as they would, as you would have them do unto you.
Yeah.
Um, and that is the standard of social intercourse, right?
Yeah.
They were
Exactly.
taught the relation of individual rights to group rights
Okay.
and community
Okay.
obligations. So it's all socialization, even in the studies, right? They were taught
Definitely.
history and culture of the various Earth races, because that's important because they're going to be venturing outwards eventually. Methods of advancing and improving world trade, which is going to be incredibly important to them as they venture out again. They were
Mm-hmm.
taught coordination of conflicting duties and emotions, which is something I think we could all do well to learn.
That we
At
need.
least
Yes,
I know I
definitely.
could. Yeah.
Yes.
And finally, the cultivation of play, humor, and competitive substitutes for physical fighting, which is again a socialization thing, really.
It's a socialization
Yeah.
thing again.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So that's what they would learn. That's their schooling. The average age of betrothal, because basically, it was important that they were building their population, right? Their
Yeah.
numbers, because that's what they had to do, at least in the beginning. So average age of betrothal was 18. And at 18, they would go into a 2-year period of instruction about marital responsibilities. Um, so that was 2 years. And that's something that we don't have, which we probably should. I think that would be enormously
It would solve
beneficial.
a lot of the
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
problems that we have in society and in couples and the
Yeah.
way that we interact. I mean, how
Yep.
important this is, the foundations, because we've really talked about the consequences of the big picture. So in civilization, in the universe, but personally as individuals, in relationships, personal relationships, the impact all of this situation had also upon us, right?
Yep. So at the end of that 2-year period, so they enter that at about 18, and then by 20 years old, they'd be eligible to get married.
Yeah.
And then once they get married, then they would either begin their careers or life work, or they would begin training for it.
Okay.
So that's what they would do. So that's basically life in the garden,
Okay.
broad strokes, obviously.
Yeah.
I think to finish this segment, I think it's important to sort of differentiate the goals of Dalmatia compared to the goals of Eden, though. So
Okay.
Dalmatia was constructed and designed to uplift civilization by providing a highly functioning example civilization in the city, which would attract people into it, right?
Okay.
So they would invite people in, say, "Hey, come spend some
Copy
time
our
in the city."
copy our model, let's
Yeah.
say.
Learn our ways of doing things and take them back with you to your tribes, and you'll be able to uplift your tribes that way. And that's how, so it was come stay with us, learn, and then go back. And that's how they
Yeah.
uplifted, right? Eden was also a highly functioning example of high civilization, but at least initially, they had to be preoccupied with building up their numbers
Okay.
and also training, with the studies and training them with world trade and all of these different things and the history of the different races so that they could not attract people into the garden so that Adam and Eve's children could go out. And what they were supposed to do once their numbers had hit,
Yeah, the
I
critical
can't
number.
it was either 500,000 or 1,000,000. I think it was 500,000 for us.
Okay.
Um, Once they hit that number, then they would actually go out and they would establish regional centers, which in my mind would act very similar to the way Dalmatia was functioning.
Yeah.
And people would be attracted to those centers, right? So how Eden functioned is it was a little bit more difficult to actually get into Eden. In order to get into Eden, you were welcome, but you had to be sponsored by a resident of the garden to actually come in.
Okay.
And
Okay.
in order to come in, even though you're sponsored, you had to be told of the plan and the purpose of the garden, and then you had to make a declaration of loyalty to that plan, and also a declaration of loyalty to the Universal Father.
Okay.
Now, why is
Interesting.
that important? That is because we live on a rebellion planet where
Okay.
everyone has rebelled against the Universal Father
You have to know
and the
their
divine plan
allegiance.
and right. So, in order to come in, you got to understand the plan, and you have to declare your loyalty to that plan and to the
Interesting.
unseen Father, Universal Father. So, a little
And let
bit
me
different.
just, how do you
Yeah.
get beyond the wild animals and all that? Is there a way that how did they
Yeah.
come
So,
into? Because that's something that really, struck
okay.
in my
So
mind.
The way I have it in my mind is there's 12 gates, right?
Yeah.
And so there's corresponding gates in the lower wall as well. But the paths between the two walls, I think there was some sort of wall or structure that was between them.
Okay.
But I think they were made of something that could be, if they were attacked and somebody breached the lower front wall, they
Uh-huh.
could like pull a lever or something like that, and those walls between would sort of fall down, and then all of
Okay,
the
yeah,
animals could
like,
come in.
yeah, got it, got it.
So yeah, so it's that kind of deal. So
That kind of deal.
so in normal peaceful times, you'd be protected going between. You'd probably have to be escorted by guards or whatever.
Yeah, exactly, that's what I
Yeah.
thought.
But if
Or maybe
yeah,
like a road, like in Berlin there was like the road
yeah,
from east
checkpoints
to
and all that
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, but in times of war or whatever, there'd be some sort of mechanism to get rid of
yeah,
those barriers so that the wild animals could do their thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting, interesting. So,
Oh,
uh,
it's incredible. Yeah. Yeah.
interesting. So, are we done with the picture of the garden? Can we go into what happened with Adam and Eve? And
Let's do it.
let's do
Let's
it.
do it.
So,
Yeah.
let's see what happened and where I think we come in contact with the story in the Bible. So stay tuned and we'll find out. So, welcome to the third segment of this very interesting podcast about the second revelation of the story of Adam and Eve. So, we're going to talk now about the fall of Adam and Eve, that moment where we coincide with the first book of the Bible, the Genesis. So, start to point out some of the interesting facts about these relationships and starting really redefining. That's a word that we use here a lot, redefining this story, and also taking into account other stories, because we also talked about how myth has transcended and has created our civilization. So here in this story, we're going to talk about the fall that has echoed throughout the religious tradition for thousands of years, often simplified into a tale of temptation and disobedience. But the deeper story reveals a far more complex struggle, the challenge of uplifting a troubled world faster than it was ready for. When the plan to accelerate a human process failed, the garden collapsed, and humanity once again faced the long path of rebuilding civilization. So let's dive in.
I think I want to start this segment with saying that to me this part is really heartbreaking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
When we're talking about Dalmatian, everything, we're talking about an insidious, malicious betrayal of our whole planet and people and future.
Mm-hmm.
We're not talking about that here. Uh, what we're going to be talking about is totally super heartbreaking. Yeah. So
Yeah, yeah.
um, I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, good, good.
um,
Thank you, thank you. It gets us into perspective and tone.
yeah. So I think what we really, really need to keep in the back of our minds as a background to paint what we're going to be talking about in this segment on is what Adam and Eve actually faced on this planet. So we
Uh-huh.
already talked about that they were supposed to pick up and carry on what the divine or planetary administration was supposed to have built for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing. Our planet was isolated, so none of the planetary circuits of communication or anything like that were functioning. They had no one to talk to. There was one connection to the celestial government, I guess, the spiritual side that they
Mm-hmm.
could talk to, and that was, and this is, I love this part, is an archangel. No, sorry, a seraphim named
Okay.
Salonia, who is recorded in the Bible as the voice in the garden.
Okay. See, this is where it gets
Yeah,
interesting. We start to see where everything comes from, right?
right. So if they needed to communicate or find things out, it was Salonia who would speak to them and talk to them about things that were going
Okay.
on. That's all they had, and they're so and just picture that you're so used to having like how would you feel if you didn't have the internet? So not having that communication that you've been used to all of your lives, and we're talking a celestial, not eternal from no beginning, but from hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of years old,
Yeah.
having that constantly, and then suddenly nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Incredibly isolating, and just like imagine how much that sucks out of you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and on top of that, they have this active resistance from Caligastia and the Celestial Rebels who are still on the planet. So, things are pretty stacked against them.
There is an evil empire out there.
Yeah, yes. So, this is the background that I think we need to paint the rest of this story on.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
important to remember what they were up against, right?
Yeah.
So, getting into the story now. So, they're in the garden and they're doing their thing and they're building up the population of what's referred to as the violet race.
Yeah.
Why the violet race is because of how Adam and Eve actually looked. We haven't
Okay.
actually mentioned that, but Adam and Eve are described as 8 feet tall,
Mm-hmm.
just a little bit tall, and they had a skin of what's described as violet hue,
Okay.
and their skin glowed.
Okay.
So, and you got to remember, we're talking about divine beings here, so they're not going to be exactly like us. But I think one of the anecdotes of that really quickly is that's so what they would do at nighttime is they would, put wraps on or whatever their clothes were. But obviously they wouldn't have anything on their heads, and their heads would still sort of
Okay.
glow, right?
That's where all
And
the yara came from, right?
that's where halos come
Yeah.
from. Yeah, in all of the religious iconography and stuff like that. Any sage or religious or person like that always has a halo around them, and it's because of Adam and Eve.
Okay.
I
Got
think
it.
that kind of stuff's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, um, that was a tangent. I'm sorry.
No. 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 No.
But so they're doing their thing in the garden and they're building up their civilization, but they're encountering an incredible amount of resistance once they go past the borders, the wall that we're talking about, and try and establish relations with the outside tribes and stuff like that. So now we're probably about 120 years out from when they arrived and started their mission in the garden.
Mm-hmm.
Um, things are going frustratingly slow for both Adam and Eve, and they have managed to get things going with some of the neighboring tribes, a confederation of tribes
Okay.
outside the gate, and they have sort of a group of captains, I guess is sort of how it's described, where they would. That's sort of how things were organized. He has.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't describe it militarily, but they were his main guys,
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
middle managers. I don't know
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you want to call it that. And they had another guy who was the chief of the Confederation of Tribes, who was really, really taken with Adam and Eve and their mission, and he wanted to do everything that he could to help them out, and he became their right-hand guy, and his name was Sarapatasha.
Okay.
So we've got his name.
Interesting.
So when we're talking about memories of everything that's happened, and we'll go into more detail about exactly what happened, but just keep in mind that the biblical account of this is very distorted, and the memory
Yeah.
is it's just it's so distorted that it really doesn't do justice to any of what we're talking about or what happened anymore. But what I find it absolutely extraordinary is that the story is almost exactly echoed in the legend of King Arthur and Guinevere and Lancelot.
Interesting that you point this out.
Yeah. Um, I encourage everybody to once we've sort of laid out the story of what
Yeah,
happens and stuff like that to sit back and let those comparisons percolate.
yeah,
Um,
definitely.
so we'll if you can remind me to go back to that after I've said the story and we can sort of
Definitely,
compare the
definitely. No,
characters
no,
a little bit.
definitely.
Yeah,
I have it right
yeah,
here. No worries.
yeah. Good. Yeah. So what actually happened then? So Um, we're about 120 years in or so, and we've got this council, the confederation of tribes that they're slowly building, but it's still frustratingly hard to move out from that, right? They're trying to establish tribal relations and trade relations with the tribes, just to try and expand a little bit, try and get the culture out from the garden as best they can while they're
Mm-hmm.
building up their population reserves. Um, it's just it was so hard, even with the help of these captains and Sarapatasha.
Mm-hmm.
Um, again, just so frustrating, right? And Eve, even more than Adam, um, was particularly frustrated.
Okay.
She felt this frustration a lot more, and her and I guess just to back up really, it needs to be said that Caligastia would visit the garden quite often,
Was he
and
welcome?
he would.
And what would happen?
Well, it's pretty hard to stop a spiritual being with
Got it.
stone and brick walls, right?
Got it.
So Adam and Eve could see him, but nobody else could,
Okay.
right? So he would visit, and he would try and win them over to his side, the rebellion, and get them to rebel against God and the divine universe and everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Hence,
and
hence. Well, I think just real quick the comparison. You know the snake, and you know how it appears. You know, I don't know. Maybe that's it. I don't know. In the biblical story, you know, the biblical account.
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah. I think there's an analogy there, yeah, because it's the snake that sort of offers the temptation, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
um, Caligastia, based on the absolute devastation of planetary culture, um, Adam and Eve were pretty inoculated to anything that Caligastia was trying to get them to do because, the evidence of the absolute total mess that he made is just everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, they were just like, see you later. So he tried to do an end run on Eve because it just wasn't working. His so-called frontal assault, trying to get them to come over to his
Yeah.
side. So
Yeah.
he thought he'd just do a little sort of maneuver on Eve.
Okay.
And he put this idea in Saripatesha's head that maybe it would be a good idea if the neighboring Nodite tribes could have a violet race child born to them now, in order to cement relations and start building up the civilization there.
Okay.
Awesome idea and everything, but it's not what the plan is, right?
Exactly. This is the important thing. Because
Yeah.
let's put it in simple terms. He's trying to say that there should be a mating, something beyond this, or
He was advocating for a child basically,
okay,
born into his tribe with violet blood.
okay,
Yeah.
okay, got it.
Because it would uplift because he knew the mission was to uplift the genetics of the population and everything. So
Okay.
he thought, well, let's kickstart
No,
this. Let's do a quick shortcut. Let's do a shortcut, right?
it makes sense.
And
It makes sense, of
yeah,
course, definitely.
yeah,
A lot of bad things.
logical.
Yeah, a lot of bad
Yeah,
decisions sometimes make sense, but you have to look.
yeah,
That's why it's important to really step back and understand. Just a
yeah,
big a side note, but
yeah.
continue, please,
But
Derek.
Adam and Eve are not supposed to procreate with anybody but
Exactly,
themselves.
that's the thing.
It's their children who are supposed to procreate with indigenous people on the planet. So big problem there.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of a shortcut is going to become a big problem as well.
Okay.
But again, we're talking, all of this background that we were talking about before is like, the frustration and the isolation. And
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
can we not, it's been 120 years. Can we not do something to try and help this along?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, they talk, Sarah and Eve talk about this, and Eve sort of eventually gets won over to this. And and it needs to be said that Sarah doesn't know he's being manipulated. Like he's very sincere in all of this.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't know he's been being manipulated by Caligastia.
Got it.
Um, Eventually Eve says, okay, let's do this.
Okay.
And so basically, yeah, so it took a long time for her to, come around to this, but basically she conceived a child, not with Sarapatasha, but with the spiritual leader of the Confederation of Tribes.
Okay.
And his name was Kano or Kano.
Okay.
Cano. Okay.
Okay. Interesting, that word.
And
Yeah.
yeah. And the deed was done.
Okay.
So basically, she conceived a child with this Kano guy,
Okay.
the spiritual leader of the Confederation of Tribes, right? So when Adam found out,
And this is interesting because this is now, I mean, we look at it, we're talking about it as a very, political, genetical, mission.
it's got it all.
It's there,
It's
but
got it
what
all.
about the relationship? This is the interesting thing.
Right.
What about Adam and Eve?
Yeah.
They were a couple. What did this do to that relationship? So please, Derek, tell us.
Yeah, in terms of their personal relationship with each other, I don't think it really gets into that too much. But Adam realized right away what it meant.
Okay.
What this transgression of their mission and mandate meant.
Okay.
And he was absolutely and totally heartbroken.
Okay.
And I think it's also important to realize that Adam and Eve, as this divine couple, this order of material sons and daughters, always work as a couple. Man and woman, as a couple, always, in everything that they do. So he's like sitting there and he's like, oh my God, she's defaulted in the mission. I'm going to be alone.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
And let's remember the sequence of what happened in the biblical story. Okay. Please continue, Derek.
Right. So he decides, I'm going to go out and I'm going to commit the same transgression so I can share her fate and we can still be together.
Okay.
So he goes out and he finds a Nodite Nephilim woman named Leota.
Okay.
Leota.
Okay.
And he basically conceived a child with her.
Okay.
So in doing so, he committed the same transgression as Eve.
Got it.
So now both of them
the
are
same
in
apple,
default.
right?
It's the apple, but that's the apple. Okay, and it's not just chomping an apple from a tree.
But you know
Um,
what? You know what? I kind of knew this or hinted at. I don't know at an early age. I don't know. I don't want to say a kid, but I mean, the serpent, and in archetypes,
yeah,
and what really teaches us is the primal source, the one of the most basic, which is also very linked to sex. It's, I mean, in the conception and all that creative
yeah,
energy. So it's really
yeah.
interesting, that we look at the archetypes in the biblical narrative and how that, translated from the original narrative, right?
The seed is still kind of there, but
Yeah,
it's
it is. It
very,
is.
very hard to pick it out, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So continue,
So
please, Derek. This is so interesting.
yeah, so we're at the point, they've both made this transgression, right?
Hmm.
And that's basically a default in their mission because
Okay.
they're stipulated in their mission is they are not supposed to be procreating with indigenous people of the planet.
Exactly.
Now, why is that such a big deal? Well, first of all, it goes against the divine plan of how everything's supposed to go out and the genetic uplift and the spread and everything, which is way above my pay grade for figuring out exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's
But
something that we don't have to go into that. No, no need. Yeah.
right. So now what we kind of have to understand is the mechanics of how this becomes an actual default and a fall. The fall of Adam and Eve. It's not the
Definitely.
fall of man. We have to differentiate. Man didn't fall. It was Adam and Eve. They're divine beings.
Yeah.
They're actually our planetary mother and father,
Yeah.
is how, yeah, we should probably
Very
be looking
important.
at them.
Very important. Thanks for pointing that
Yeah.
out, Derek.
Yeah. But they're divine beings. So the mechanics of how this actually becomes a default and a fall has to do with the tree of life,
Hmm.
which of course we find in the Bible, right?
Yeah.
Now, we've already talked about how the fruit of the tree of life allows when they eat it, because there's specific modifications in their body. Well, that's for the Anunnaki, but Adam and Eve were divine beings, so they already had all of this
Yeah,
stuff in
they
their
came
bodies
they came with that from the factory, factory preset.
from the factory, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And and so this mechanism within them that allowed them to take advantage of the qualities of this fruit, which gave them immortality.
Hmm.
um it was dependent on an unbroken spiritual connection with the divine mother spirit.
Okay.
um I don't know how else to say that.
Yeah, 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 yeah. We
um
can later point it out and
yeah.
have other podcasts
but
about the Mother
but
Spirit.
basically it relied on an unbroken spiritual circuit
Okay, and they
for
broke
that
that circuit.
mortality to be maintained. So what would break a spiritual circuit like that, right?
Hmm.
It's discord with the will of God,
Okay.
with the mandates of their mission.
Oh, yes. So they
That
basically
that
yeah,
breaks
yeah.
that breaks the circuit.
That
It
makes a
breaks
lot
the
of
circuit.
sense, and this is
Yeah,
such an important role that you can. I mean, uh, it's one strike and you're out, right?
yeah. So the other thing that I think we need to mention really quickly is that only Adam and Eve had that mechanism in them. Their children didn't have that mechanism.
Okay.
So it's not like they could just keep eating the fruit and they would be immortal. It was only Adam and Eve.
Okay.
So it was part of how it all works, that their children, and that's one of the reasons why Adam and Eve weren't supposed to participate in procreating with
Yeah.
the rest of the
Yeah,
inhabitants,
that's
because
why
they're
it sets
they're
everything
above all of that, right?
it defaults
Yeah,
and sets everything off track. Definitely.
yeah. So breaking that spiritual circuit stops their ability to maintain their immortality.
Okay.
So why is that important? Why is their being immortal why does that make it a fall? Okay, I'm not saying that properly. So why is it that that not having immortality means a failure of the mission? Thanks, that's better.
Yeah.
So it's because in order to skillfully and strategically oversee the injection of their divine genetics and the blending of their children over time, thousands and thousands of years, somebody needs to oversee that.
Huh?
And
Yeah.
that's what Adam and Eve are supposed to be doing, and that's why they're immortal.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, then the whole thing crashes and burns because there's no one to manage it. There's no one to oversee it. There's no, over time, over thousands of years, people forget. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that is the mechanics of how it is actually considered a default of their mission. They lost their immortality and they weren't able to function as the overseers of this biological uplift.
So that is really sad, and
Yeah.
now bringing it back to King Arthur and Guinevere, this part of the story, I think that's where this
Yeah.
kind of makes a lot of sense.
Right. So if you want to make direct comparisons, I mean, obviously you have Adam and Arthur and Guinevere and Eve. So King Arthur and Guinevere and Adam and Eve. That's pretty straightforward, I think.
Yeah.
Seripatasha is, in this case, I think he would be, well, Seripatasha and Cano, they're sort of two people where in the Arthurian legend, it's only one
Yeah,
person, and that's
exactly.
Lancelot.
Yeah.
It's Sir Lancelot.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, right? If you think of the person who basically prepared the way for this high civilization and set it all up and all of that kind of stuff, it's obviously Van and Merlin, right? Like we
Yeah.
talked
Yeah.
about, like what Van did over the 160,000 year period to prepare the way. We know that Merlin prepared the way for Arthur. I mean, even comparing Camelot with Eden,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Definitely.
mean, it's striking, absolutely striking.
Yeah.
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 And, you have the adversary and Morgan Le Fay and Caligastia.
Yeah. No, it's
You
there.
have, yeah,
The
we
archetypes are
haven't,
there.
we haven't gotten this far yet, but you have the son, who is Cain and Mordred.
Yeah.
Eve's son is Cain. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah.
But, it's all there, right? So, and it's so specifically, almost exactly the story that I'm telling right now of Adam and Eve. It's almost scary.
Well,
And you kind of, and I sit there and I kind of have to wonder if there isn't some sort of celestial manipulation of that legend to help us remember an
definitely.
even more important story. Yeah.
Definitely. I
Right?
believe so.
Yeah.
That's the way that we find and we structure our beliefs. So, but let's
Yeah.
continue with the story because
Yeah.
it gets very
Yeah.
interesting. So,
Yeah. So, all this happened and word got out to the inhabitants of the garden. I'm not necessarily talking just about Adam and Eve's children, I'm talking about all the other inhabitants too, the workers and everybody who were already there. They freaked out. They absolutely furious. They spilled out of the garden and attacked the Nodite settlement and absolutely slaughtered and killed everybody
okay.
because it's a pretty belligerent race, the Nodite race.
Okay.
So we're still dealing with a lot of primitive sentiment and stuff like that. I mean, I haven't had the chance to really uplift it over
Yeah.
the space of 100 years. They went out and just completely killed everybody. Now we're talking chain reactions here. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the cousin tribes that are further out hear about this and they freak out and they gather this massive army to march on the garden in
Definitely. I mean,
revenge,
you're
right?
threatened to annihilation. You'd rather strike first,
Right,
right?
right. So Adam and Eve, they find out about this. They find about this army, and they're like, "Okay, what do we do?" And they decide we're not going to sit here and get into some huge battle militarily. We're going to vacate the garden,
Okay.
and this is them being cast out of the garden.
Definitely.
But they're not being cast out of the garden by God. They're being cast out of the garden by the consequences of their
The
actions.
situation, exactly. Look at that. How that
Yes.
really, it's not really God that is, taking out that grace. It's them that really,
Yeah.
created the default, and therefore were cast out of that Eden that they created.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
That's right.
beautiful. Awesome,
And
awesome.
this is where we go back to when I was talking about the runner-up location for the garden when Van and his crew were looking for places to build the garden.
Okay.
So the runner-up location, and Adam knew about this, was in between the rivers in Mesopotamia,
Okay.
um, where the rivers were narrow enough that they could build a wall and all that kind of stuff. So they knew about this, and they said, "Okay, let's go that way."
And then we
Um,
kind of start tying in the dots with the more of the biblical story and more of the
yeah,
historical story of mankind and civilization and all
that's right.
what we
We're
already
getting
know.
a lot closer. We're getting closer and closer to recorded history and
Exactly.
more accepted myth and legend, right?
Definitely. Okay.
So the other thing we should probably mention is Cano, the father of the child with Eve.
Mm-hmm.
He was killed in the initial attack
Okay.
when the inhabitants of the garden went out and killed everybody.
Okay.
Seraphatasha, looking around, just going, "Oh my God, what have I done?" He went and he drowned himself in the river.
Oh.
So, just to tie up those loose ends.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And then now that we have AI, this is interesting for you, our audience that would maybe like to try it out. Why don't you go and use any AI and kind of trying to compare the story of Adam and Eve from the Urantia book with King Arthur and Guinevere. Might be
Uh,
some.
that's a rabbit hole that I've been down.
All right, so I wouldn't have ever imagined, Derek. I don't know where you would have where you ended, but maybe that's for another time. But anyway,
No,
so
it's good. It's good. Yeah, there's a few more characters that we can talk about, but they're a little more minor.
all right.
But it's
Anyways,
it's it's good. Yeah.
okay,
Um, so basically, they start trucking on over to this secondary area, and that's where they establish the second Garden of Eden.
okay,
Okay, so they're cast out of this first idyllic one, and they go and in the Bible, they're saying, they have to work the fields and
yeah,
with the sweat and the dust and all of that kind of stuff. And that's pretty much what it was like. Like, they arrived in a beautiful garden. It had taken 80 years of construction before they got there. There was a lot of stuff waiting for them when they got there.
yeah. I think the
Um,
vegetation and everything was a little bit better. The kind of climate
oh,
and everything.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah. When they got to their location of the second garden, they basically had to start from scratch.
yeah.
And again, the first thing that they start building is a wall.
Oh,
So they build a wall to the north between where the rivers come sort of close. This is a 57-mile wall
okay.
that they ended up building. And the bottom with the rivers were wide enough at the time that
Yeah.
they were good enough defense. And to the south, they don't really say too much about what was going on there. It's possible that might have actually been where the Persian Gulf reached up to,
Okay.
but I can't say for sure.
Got it.
But anyway, that's where they established the second garden. Now, on the way to the second garden, Cain was born.
Okay.
And Cain is the son of Eve and Cano. So he was half violet and he was half um nutite, I guess.
Okay. Got it.
Nephilim, right?
Interesting.
And it's interesting when you start talking about different percentages of violet blood, because when you look at the legends, especially the Sumerian legends, when you look at the story of Gilgamesh,
Mm-hmm.
especially, he is described, and I might get this backwards, but two-thirds God and one-third human.
Okay. Got it.
And And when we're talking about God here, they're basically talking about Adam and Eve's children. So descent, like he's got that inheritance in him, two-thirds of it somehow, and one-third is
And I
not.
think a lot of
So
the mythical, when you look at Greek and a lot of other mythology, how many times it's been represented of this mixture of human and divine
right.
genetics, right?
Yes, yeah. So that's where this idea of a demigod comes
Yeah,
from.
yeah.
It's like the son of a god, who conceived a child with a human mother or father or whatever, right?
Interesting,
So
interesting.
that went on for the second time, because we know, with the fall of Dalmatia, the rebels had to resort to sexual reproduction, and we had the first case of the sons of God going into the daughters of men.
Yeah,
And now, we're going to have a second case of that coming from the second garden, but several thousand years later, right?
interesting.
Um, so they're building and okay, yeah. So Cain was born on the way to the second garden. Now, who's Abel? Abel, because Cain and Abel, that actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Abel was the first son of Adam and Eve, born in the second garden.
Okay,
So he was full blood violet. So he was Adam and Eve's son. And a lot of the problems between Abel and Cain, or Cain and Abel, is that Cain wasn't fully Adam and Eve's child, and
got it.
Abel used to lay into Cain like you wouldn't believe about that.
Okay, got it.
And Cain did slay Abel
Okay.
because of that. Um, and he did eventually have to leave a lot, mostly because of that.
They
And he
banned,
did
yeah,
venture.
definitely. So
They
he
they
was
didn't
banished.
banish. They didn't banish him. He he was in the same way that Mordred was, what in
Okay,
the legend, right? He's this constant reminder of the fall, of the default, right?
got it.
He's the embodiment, the physical
But he
embodiment
leaves. That's the
of.
interesting thing,
Yeah.
that we see in
So
the Bible, that he goes
yeah,
to the other land, right?
he's encouraged to leave. He's thinking maybe I should leave, and
Yeah.
Adam and Eve are like, yeah, well, if you want to, we would support that. Right?
Yeah.
So, it's not in a super bad way or
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
but there's that going on. He does go to the land of Nod. But now we know what the land of Nod is and who was there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the Eastern Nephilim who are living there, the descendants of their leader Nod, who are living there. And this is the southwest part of Iran now, right? So that's where he went, and he established a city, and was actually quite instrumental in building up really good relations with that group of people and the inhabitants of the second garden. So in some ways, what Seraphitation and Eve were hoping for in having a child like that actually did come to fruition, but it was just the wrong way
Yeah.
to have
Yeah.
that happen, and it was a contravention of the mission.
Yeah.
So that's what happened to Cain,
Yeah.
and that's all true from the Bible. Like, yeah, I don't know if there was a jawbone or any of that kind of stuff.
But how
Um,
interesting, how everything ties in, and when you look at the original story, what really happened and how that, evolved into this, we make sense of it all, of
yeah,
this story, and I think we covered everything, right? Because
Well,
next
there's a
time,
couple of things I could say, but
yeah,
just to close it off, if that's all right.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
okay, cool. So they did build up the garden, the second garden, and they did, and this is the thing that really attracts me to Adam and Eve and why they're kind of my favorites is because just like every one of us humans,
Hmm.
they failed. They
Definitely.
had this failure and and they spent the rest of their lives doing everything they could to redeem themselves based on that. And for some reason, I have an affinity to that.
And tell us what happened. I think this is important because,
It's so different from all of the other divine bestowals that we've
yeah,
had,
yeah, it's a love story,
right?
basically,
It's a
right?
love story, but it's also it's a story of picking yourself up by your
Definitely,
bootstraps, even though
definitely.
you've failed
No,
incredibly.
and yeah,
Yeah,
that's it's a struggle love
yeah,
story, which is not just like
yeah,
the banal love stories. And I think this is important because we know now that they lost the ability to have eternal life, like we were said, because they
yeah,
can't eat the fruit anymore because
yeah,
they transgressed the spiritual mandates. Now they eventually die. So what happens there?
yeah. So they did die. Adam died. He was 530 years old when he died,
Okay,
and Eve had died about 19 years before that.
okay.
So they just basically died of old age,
And they went into
really.
again back
But
into spirit or into a different
well, they went back into the universe career, but they weren't the order of material sons and daughters anymore. They had been degraded
okay.
to what we are. Ascending sons and daughters is what we're referred to.
Okay, okay,
So they're actually ascended mortals now.
okay. Interesting.
So now the other thing that I should point out really quickly is that they did leave as many of their progeny as they could in the time that was left to them.
Okay,
So they built up their reserves as absolutely much as they could in
okay.
the time that they had. And it's nothing like what we were supposed to have, but still pretty potent. So it's done some really good things,
Definitely.
um, as it was supposed to. Um, It's interesting. There's a guy in the Urantia community who's done some really good research on this. His name's Halbert Katzen,
Okay,
and he did a report, and he has found um, that there's been some research on a gene called the microencephalin gene,
okay.
which shows marked improvement and growth in the human brain about 38,000 years ago.
All right.
Yeah. So it's actually really incredible stuff that's coming out in the research.
Like we said,
And
it's simply things that we do not know about and that eventually
yeah,
will pop up and we kind of put the puzzle back in together and understand it better,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So it's good. So the the ultimate result of this is that after 160,000, not that's not true. It's 460,000 years of having an unbroken line of a physical manifestation of the divine administration on our planet. So we're talking about the Anunnaki until the rebellion broke out. Then we're talking about Van until Adam and Eve came, and then Adam and Eve until they died, and that broke the line.
There wasn't any celestial agencies that could
There's
communicate.
no more physical manifestation of the divine administration on our planet
Interesting
anymore
thing to know.
because Adam and Eve died, right? Um, we'll talk a little bit more about other bestowals, but in terms of having a normal planet has the 100 visible staff still there with their associates, which is 200,
Mm-hmm.
and then you do have Adam and Eve, after that happened. So there's on a normal planet, there's a massive like physical manifestation of the divine administration
Guiding us
on
and
a planet,
and serving with
guiding
us
us.
and yeah,
Yes,
structuring with us.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So nothing for us now, right? And so within, a few thousand years, here we are again, back to almost nothing, back to
Yeah.
tribalism, the advanced society. Um, they tried to keep it going as long as they could. And I mean, we do have a very, very advanced civilization bursting forth in the historical record at the beginning of our historical record in the Sumerians,
Yeah.
with all of the math, all of the astronomy, all of these tools of civilization in place, and that can be traced directly back to Adam and Eve, and with the Sumerians themselves, back even further to their traditions, because they're the direct descendants of the central rebels, right? Nephilim. So
Interesting.
yeah,
Interesting.
so some of that culture did survive, here and there, but we do not have that physical manifestation anymore to help guide things. And so we're kind of on our own. I mean, there's still hosts and legions of celestial helpers working with and for us
But behind the
behind the
scenes,
scenes.
oh, that
But
synchronicity, by
yeah,
the way. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so in the long run, that's going to do us really well, because what that creates is a type of ascendant being who is able to believe without seeing.
Yeah.
See, on a normal planet, you can see, and all you have to do is believe what you're being told. But on a planet like this, it creates a very, very specific type of being who can believe without seeing, and that's a really
That's
important
what we are.
distinction,
And that's what we are.
and that's what we will be credited with, yeah, as we move forward. So it's not all bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so that's bad. Um, we don't have that continuity of culture, of
Yeah.
history, of divine guidance or anything like that. But I think, and again, we already sort of said this, but it has to be said, there has never been a fall of man.
Important thing.
Adam and Eve's so-called sin, the original sin that everybody talks about, it's not a sin of humanity, right? It was judged as a default of their mission, but it wasn't open rebellion like Caligastia wanted them to do.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a
It was a
mistake.
mistake. Yeah,
Again.
and it
There
was
we
it
go.
was judged as a mistake, right?
Yeah.
So all of these things that we're talking about, they're not humanity's failures, right?
Yeah.
There's no original sin on the part of humanity for us to
This
have
is
to
very
atone
important
for.
into exactly. This is so
Very much
important.
so.
This is very important.
These are failures of our divine administrators and civilizational co-creators. It's not us, it's them.
Yeah.
We're the victims
Yeah.
of the consequences, but there is no original sin on our part that we have to atone for, and that's really, really important.
Which is going to make the case for later on what happens with Jesus into the why he came here. So I mean, this is very interesting. But
Yes.
I think we can. We're about to close here. Just I'm going to give you
Yep.
because
That's
we
it.
are okay. Great, because I mean, this is. I mean, and it took us. I think this is going to be a long podcast
It's a bit long.
because we
Yeah.
had to get all
It's a
this.
big story.
It's a very big story. It's a very interesting story, but it's the genesis. This is where, if we do not clarify all of this at this point in biblical history, this is the starting point. I mean, everything else falls from this story. So it's very important that
Yes.
we understand this, and especially the part about the original sin, that it does not fall upon
Yes.
us. There is no
Yep.
such thing. And we are, as we know, and if we learned in this and many other things in life, we are accountable for our actions, not to the actions of anybody else, and that's
Yep.
why the original sin really does not have any power over us. But I understand, the story of everything, the adversities, everything that happened there, the default, and very, very interesting to understand and that we're going to learn later. I think it's very interesting to point out how, as you've been saying, there's no material administration anymore, any material guidance as we had up to this point, which is what will create the situation or why the next revelation, the third revelation came into play, which is what starts with what or continues with the biblical narrative and what we're going to be
Yep.
learning in another podcast. So, Derek, it was awesome.
It's a good
Anything
one.
else that before
Yeah.
we leave?
There was something. It's just sort of gone out of my brain right now. Oh, yes. So Adam and Eve, even though they're ascendant beings like us right now, they are actually still very involved in the divine administration of our planet. I think that needs to be said,
Right.
but not in the way as originally intended. They're part of the celestial part of the administration now, but they are still very, very involved and interested in everything that
They're
goes on with our
actively
planet.
helping us still.
Yeah.
All right.
We're never going to have a replacement planetary mother and father. They are our Adam and Eve. It's just that they're going to have to help us in another capacity. That's all.
Awesome. Awesome. That's
But
good
they
to
are
know.
doing it. Yeah.
Good
So
to know.
it's a good note to end on.
Yeah. Thanks. Well, thanks a lot, Derek. It's been really interesting and it's really, informative. So thanks a lot. And we're going to be
My
continuing
pleasure.
with this. So, and to you, our audience, thank you for joining us in this long journey. And remember to subscribe, tell people about this if you liked it. They might find a lot of good things. And stay tuned. We're not going to, next episode is not going to be next week on the continuing, but stay tuned. In a couple of weeks, we're going to continue with these revelation stories. So I'm Santiago Neeland. This is the Divine Within. Until next time, take care and carpe diem. On the Divine Within podcast, we'll share real conversations to help you find a personal connection with God. My goal is to support your faith, growth, and journey toward discovering the divine within yourself. Join us to deepen your faith and spiritual journey.